This case is fascinating because it begins with pathology, not romance. A mafia patriarch stripped of fertility responds not with grief but with control. A financially devastated woman, repeatedly dehumanized by society, enters an environment of organized violence and psychological domination. Yet the true anomaly is this: instead of being consumed by that system, she becomes the stabilizing force inside it. What looks like a criminal marriage arrangement is actually a study in trauma bonding, survival instinct, emotional deprivation, and the terrifying human need to belong.
In Chicago's high-stakes Underworld, your body count doesn't matter. Your bloodline does. A boss without an heir is a dead man walking, just warming a throne for the next war. For 3 years, Conrad Valetti has been facing this nightmare after a doctor's news blew up his entire dynasty. A dirty deal didn't just try to kill him, it sterilized his future. The diagnosis was a biological kill shot. He was totally infertile. He's the king of a billion-dollar empire, both legit and illegal, but his family name was about to die with him. In his circle, being sterile is a death sentence worse than a bullet. His rivals smelled blood in the water. The word got out. Conrad's clock was ticking, and his crew started plotting to take over. But fate has a sick sense of humor. Enter Reese Calloway, 27, slaving away at Serafina, one of Conrad's hidden businesses. And let me tell you, she was no queen. Buried under $280,000 in medical debt for her late mom, she spent her nights getting dissed by rich jerks. Her ex, a finance bro named Grant Hartwell, bailed the second he found out, calling her damaged goods. Reese was basically being crushed by the city. But here's the plot twist. Conrad walks into Serafina. He doesn't see broken, he sees a titanium core that just won't crack under pressure, her last real asset. He wasn't looking for some delicate flower. He needed a survivor who'd stared down total ruin and was still standing. So this is the story of a crime lord made obsolete by his own body and the broke waitress about to flip his world upside down. It's a tale of power, lies, a wild alliance, and a biological miracle that rewrites the future of Chicago's biggest syndicate. If you're hooked, smash that like button, share this, and follow for what happens next. Now let's get back to the moment Conrad first saw his game changer. Conrad Valetti was camped out at the best table in Serafina's darkest corner, a spot with zero light and a brick wall for cover. His 2 bodyguards stood watch at the entrance, close enough to move, but too far to hear. He didn't need a menu. He owned the joint through a maze of shell companies. His storm gray eyes were locked on the server who just took an earful from some snobs but served their food without a single twitch. Reese walked up to his secluded table, posture perfect, notepad ready. Her eyes were a little red, but her voice was pure ice. "Good evening. Can I take your order?" Conrad skipped the niceties. He tilted his head, giving her a look that would make hardened criminals fold. "You were waiting on table 7, he said, his voice low and sharp. It wasn't a question. Table 7 was Vera Ashton's crew. Reese's knuckles went white around her notepad. She knew exactly who he was. Every staff member did. The rule from day one was simple. Serve Conrad Valetti, fast, quiet, and don't make eye contact for more than 3 seconds. Reese held his stare. "Yes, sir, I was. And if you're asking if I cried, I didn't. No time for that. My shift ends at 11, and I've got 14 tables to go, so what'll it be? Or should I get someone else for you?" A dead silence fell between them. In that instant, Conrad didn't see a waitress putting on a brave face. He saw the one thing he'd been hunting for 3 years. Someone who wasn't afraid of him. This wasn't ignorance. It was the kind of armor you build after facing way worse things than some mob boss in a dark corner. "A double espresso," Conrad ordered, the corner of his mouth ticking up. It wasn't a smile, just a silent nod that this woman had met his test head-on. Reese nodded, turned, and left. She had no idea his eyes followed her all the way to the bar and to a kitchen corner where, for a split second, her hands shook. Her hands trembled for exactly 3 seconds before she took a deep breath and got back to work. That was all the weakness she'd allow. Conrad saw the slip, and he saw the recovery. He left Serafina at 10:45 that night, skipping a normal tip for 3 crisp $100 bills under his cup. From his car, he called his most trusted guy. "I need a full background check," he ordered, his voice dripping with authority. "Reese Calloway, server at Serafina, age 27. I want her financials, address, school records, and every connection she has. On my desk by 7 a.m. tomorrow." By 3 in the morning, the file was sitting on his desk. He hadn't slept, instead poring over every page in his dark study like it was a multi-million-dollar deal. The target: Reese Calloway from Rockford, Illinois. Her dad died in a work accident with no payout when she was 11. Her mom worked 2 jobs for 13 years until she got stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Reese, a college sophomore at the time, dropped out to take care of her. Her mom died 2 years ago, leaving a $280,000 debt that Reese was stuck with. The file showed 0 criminal record, 0 powerful friends, and 0 loyalties to anyone. The bottom line was brutal. She was completely alone. Conrad shut the folder. He sat there in the dark, tapping a slow beat on the desk. All the pieces were falling into place like a master plan. His summary was short and sweet. The asset is clean, tough, has no baggage, and isn't scared. At 6 a.m., Conrad Valetti was on his way back to Serafina. He had an offer he was only going to make once. At 6:15 a.m., Serafina was no longer a fancy restaurant. The romantic lighting was gone, replaced by harsh fluorescence and the smell of bleach. The only person there was Reese Calloway, wiping down tables. She showed up 45 minutes early to earn an extra $50 a week, the cash that decided if she ate that day. A click from the back door echoed in the silence. That was weird. The kitchen crew didn't start until 7. The manager wouldn't show up until after 8. Only staff and the owner could use that door, and the owner never used main entrances. Conrad Valetti appeared in the hall, alone. He wore a dark coat over a shirt, revealing a scar on his shoulder. He looked tired, but laser-focused, his eyes just as cold and sharp as the night before. Reese didn't move, a wet rag in her hand, showing 0 fear. "We're closed," she said flatly. "I can get you an espresso, but the machine takes 20 minutes to warm up. The kitchen's shut down." Conrad ignored her offer to let him sit, staying about 3 steps away. His hands were in his pockets, his stare showing this was not a social call. "I'm not here for coffee, Miss Calloway. I have a proposal for you, and I don't waste time." Reese put her rag down on the counter, her eyes locked on his. "Go on." Conrad started his pitch with the cold precision of a general. His words were brutally efficient, each one a calculated move. He laid out the situation: a powerful organization threatened by a hostile takeover from a Russian psycho named Anton Jurkov. Conrad's one weak spot, which Jurkov was exploiting, was having no heir. A 12-month deadline was on the table. If he didn't produce an heir in that time, he'd be voted out, and his empire would be ripped apart. "I need a wife," Conrad said point blank. "This is a business deal, not a romance. I need a partner who can stand up to my enemies. So here's the deal. A totally fake marriage. You'll live at my place. act like my wife for the council. In exchange, I'm wiping out your $280,000 debt. Completely. No more collectors, no more interest, zero weight on your shoulders. For 10 seconds, Ree was dead silent, a pause that told Conrad more than any negotiation ever had. Her next words were laser-focused. You're the top dog in Chicago's Underworld. You could have anyone, so why pick me? For a waitress drowning in debt, his logic was brutal. Because last night I watched you take a 20-minute beatdown without even cracking. A person who can handle that kind of pressure has a spine you can't buy. But there's something else I have to tell you. Without this, you wouldn't be agreeing with your eyes open. He paused, his jaw so tight a muscle jumped near his scar. He hadn't said this to anyone in 3 years. I can't have kids. I hit 3 years back, left me sterile. The doctors all agree. You'd be tying yourself to a man who's the end of his family line. You have to get that before you answer. Ree just watched him for a long, quiet moment. She didn't look pitiful or scared. It was like one broken soul recognizing another. And if I agree, Ree said carefully, I'm in your world. You know exactly what that world is, Conrad confirmed with a nod. I can't promise you'll be safe. That would be a lie. What I can promise is respect. And I swear, in my circle, no one will ever call you damaged again. That was a better offer than any she'd had before. Ree started to answer, but her eyes locked on something happening outside Seraphina's window. And what does she see? Grant Hartwell walking past with his new wife. She's young, blonde, wrapped in cashmere, a massive diamond on her hand, and already showing a baby bump. Grant had the chill smile of a guy who just escaped a crippling $280,000 medical bill. He walked right by without a single glance inside. His total indifference proved it. Ree Calloway was officially part of his past. Ree looked back at Conrad. Her eyes were clear, her jaw was set, her voice was ice, the sound of someone who saw the dead end and chose to walk into a war instead of fading away. When do we start? She asked. Conrad watched her for a final beat, his gut feeling confirmed. He'd made the right call. 2 o'clock this afternoon, Chicago City Hall. A car will get you at 1. You'll need your ID. That's it. He walked the back but paused at the kitchen door. And Miss Calloway, he said, not even looking back, that $300 last night wasn't a tip. It was your severance. And just like that, he was gone. Ree stood alone in the empty cafe, her knuckles white on a table, breathing fast and deep. She did not cry. There was no smile on her face. For exactly 3 seconds, she was perfectly still. Then her hands unclenched. She folded the cleaning rag, put it on the counter, untied her apron, hung it on its hook, and walked out of Seraphina for the very last time. The whole thing went down at 2 in the afternoon at City Hall, 5th floor, room 12, a tiny office that stank of old files and floor wax. There were no flowers, no guests, just 2 other guys. Judge Raymond Kessler was there, sweating like crazy, clearly terrified of the man he was in deep debt to. The other was Felix Valetti, Conrad's 28-year-old brother, leaning on a wall with his arms crossed, his face a frozen mask. Right on schedule, a black sedan Conrad sent picked Ree up from her rundown South Side apartment at 1 o'clock. She wore the only non-work outfit she had, an old gray dress she'd bought at a thrift shop for $12 3 years ago. On her feet were the same scuffed black flats she'd worn for the last 2 years. She hadn't bothered with her appearance, it didn't matter. This wasn't a marriage, it was a merger. Ree Calloway was used to signing papers for predatory loans, for leases she knew she'd break, for debts she could never pay. This was just another signature. The ceremony was over in less than 7 minutes. The judge's voice shook while he mumbled the vows, his eyes darting to Conrad like he needed permission to breathe. When it was his turn, Conrad said, "I do," with the dead, flat tone of a man closing a business deal. Ree repeated the words, her voice just as empty but perfectly steady and clear. She signed her name in the book with a firm hand, put the pen down, and didn't even glance at her new name. Felix was quiet the whole time, but his sharp eyes never left Ree. They were the same gray as his brother's, but colder, filled with a nasty mix of contempt and suspicion. He watched her like a chess master analyzing a wild, unexpected move. A car took them straight to the Valetti estate in Lincoln Park. Ree had no luggage. Her stuff wasn't even worth packing. Her entire past life was in a single canvas bag, which Conrad's men had already collected 2 hours before, like they were sanitizing a crime scene. The house was a 3-story limestone beast from the 1920s on a quiet street by the lake. From the outside, it looked like a cold, dead museum. The feeling continued inside. A huge ceiling and a crystal chandelier dominated the entry hall, but the place was still and freezing like an abandoned church. The marble floors shined like a black mirror without a single scuff, a stray shoe, or a tossed-aside coat. It was a monument to money, a place to exist, not to live. The first person she met was Margaret Byrne, the 55-year-old housekeeper. Her face was grim, but her eyes held a surprising warmth. She grabbed Ree's hand with both of hers and whispered, "Welcome home," with the sincerity that Ree knew was real. Paige Valetti was the first of the 4 younger relatives she saw. At 24, she had the family's dark hair and wore pearls with a plain dress, a weird mix of proper and totally exhausted. Ree saw it in Paige right away, a look she knew too well because she'd seen it on herself every day for the 2 years she took care of her dying mom. It's the look of a person carrying a weight way too heavy for their age, a quiet scream for rescue. "Hello?" Paige said. The word was polite, but had a little constant shake that hinted at 1,000 things she couldn't say. Tommy wasn't there. "Tommy's in the art room," Conrad said, pointing to the 3rd floor. "He keeps a pretty big emotional distance." Ree filed that info away. Then the 16-year-old twins, Nina and Noah, kids of a brother they'd lost 5 years ago, slid out of a rec room, moving like predators, checking out new prey that had wandered onto their turf. Nina's eyes raked over Ree, and her voice was loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "What interesting shoes! Did you get those at the dollar store?" A nasty snort came from Noah next to her. Ree looked down at her own beat-up shoes, then right back up at Nina. Her voice was flat, with no hurt or anger in it. "I did, and they've worked better than any $1,000 pair you probably own." Nina was shut down for a second, her smug look faltering. It was then that Ree saw it, for the first time, the tiniest tilt of Conrad's head, a ghost of a smile he hid from everyone else. That night, after Conrad went to his 1st-floor office and a deep quiet fell over the mansion, Ree was walking to her room when a figure stepped out of the stairwell, blocking her path. It was Felix Valetti, leaned against the wall, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The hallway light cut across his face, carving him out of the shadows. He stayed silent, his stare like a cold, heavy weight, letting the quiet become its own kind of threat. In this house, Ree realized, silence was a weapon. Listen to me, Felix finally said, his voice a low, calculated growl. I don't give a damn what my brother thinks he sees in you. It doesn't matter. I've seen dozens of people come through this house. He paused. They all left. You're a contract, a signature on a piece of paper. Don't you ever think that makes you one of us? Reed didn't back up an inch, even though he towered over her with the raw energy of a man who solved problems with his fists. She locked eyes with him, and her answer was pure ice, not a hint of defiance, just a dead calm fact. It was the creepy stillness of someone who's been called broken so many times it doesn't even sting anymore. I'm not confused, Felix. I know my job. I signed the papers and I do what I'm told. So hate me. Watch me. Throw whatever you want at me, but I'll be here tomorrow. And the day after that. She slid past him, her shoulder almost brushing his, and went straight to her room. She hit the lock, leaned against the door, and only then did her hands start to shake. But she didn't cry. She'd run out of tears a long time before she ever got to this place. The morning after her throwdown with Felix, Ree was up at 5 a.m. in a room that could swallow her old apartment whole. She zoned out at the ceiling for 30 seconds, then got up to do the only thing she knew how. When the world turned to chaos, she forced it into order. This wasn't about dusting. The Valetti crew had Margaret Byrne and 2 others for that. Ree's mission was way bigger. She was about to reboot the entire system of this busted-up home. Day 2, she walked into the kitchen at 6 a.m. and found a commercial-grade fridge packed with pre-made meal boxes. Each one had a name tag: Conrad, Felix, Paige, Tommy, Nina, Noah. The whole house had a separate menu. They all ate solo, in different rooms, on different schedules. 6 people under one roof, acting like total strangers. Reopened the trash can and one by one chucked every single meal. From the doorway, Margaret Byrne watched the whole thing go down. And for the first time in a hot minute, she actually smiled. In that first week, while she was clearing out a pantry, a whole crate of jars fell and exploded on the stone floor. A nasty shard of glass sliced deep into her left foot. But Ree, a pro at ignoring pain, just cleaned the wound, wrapped it up, and didn't breathe a word to anyone. That night, she made dinner. Not some fancy Italian meal, but the stuff her mom used to make back in Rockford: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a simple gravy. It was the type of food that fills a house with a scent that says, "Dinner's ready, get in here." She set the massive table in the main dining hall. This was the first time in the 4 years since the Valetti matriarch was murdered that the table was set for more than one person. She didn't call anyone down. She just cooked, set the plates, and took her seat. Paige was the first to show. She stood in the doorway for almost 2 minutes, just staring at the table and Ree sitting there alone, before she finally walked in and sat down without a word. Not and Noah came for the free food, not the family vibe. But they came, they sat, they ate. And for the first time in years, the room was filled with the quiet clink of forks on plates. Tommy was a no-show. Conrad was a no-show. Felix blew past the doorway, his eyes scanning the scene before he kept walking without a comment. But Ree saw it. His pace hitched for exactly 2 beats before he was gone. On day 3, day 4, and day 5, Ree cooked the same meal, set the same table, and sat in the same chair. She never begged anyone. She just built this little island of warmth and waited to see who'd swim to it. Paige was the first to land, and she stayed. By the 4th day, she wasn't just there to eat. She started showing up in the kitchen early, watching Ree, and asking in a super quiet voice like she was expecting to get shot down, "Can you show me how to make this sauce?" Ree just handed her the spoon with hardly any words, just, "Watch, stir slow, keep it steady." And there in the quiet kitchen, smelling like butter and garlic, Paige started to talk. Not about anything big, just tiny, shattered memories from her life before everything went wrong. "My mother used to love cooking. I miss the way the kitchen smelled. It's been dead since she died." Ree didn't give her a hug or some fake pity speech. She just stood there with her, working and listening. She knew that some people don't need words. They just need someone to stand there, quietly, and witness their pain. Tommy was the house's biggest mystery. At 19, he was basically a ghost who rarely spoke and never left the third-floor art studio. Ree didn't knock on his door. She didn't ask him to come down. She just had Margaret Byrne leave a hot plate of food on a tray outside his room every night with a napkin folded next to it. On the fifth morning, the tray was licked clean. On the seventh day, she found something waiting for her at the dining table. A small pencil sketch of a wildflower pushing its way through a crack in the pavement. There was no name, no note, but Ree knew exactly who the artist was. She picked up the little drawing, looked at it for a long moment, then carefully folded it and slid it into her pocket, where it stayed all day. On the 9th day, another drawing showed up. A sparrow on a windowsill. On the 12th, a sunset over Lake Michigan. Tommy still hadn't spoken a single word to her, but he was talking in his own language, and Ree was hearing every message loud and clear. Not and Noah were a way easier puzzle. Ree never argued or yelled. She just met all their little attacks with a chill sense of humor that their teenage drama couldn't touch. When Noah stole her only pair of shoes and she heard him giggling from his hiding spot, Ree just walked into the kitchen barefoot and started to cook. The fact that she didn't freak out rattled him so much that he brought the shoes back before dinner. A prank with no reaction is a total failure. When Na sneered, "Why are your clothes so cheap?" "You're married to the boss," Ree just said, "Fine clothes can't roast a chicken," and slid the best piece onto Na's plate. The girl ate every last bite, her attitude shut down by her stomach. Felix was a completely different animal. Felix wasn't a kid. He was a 28-year-old man who had ended lives, who had watched his brother almost die 3 years ago, and who swore no outsider would ever get close enough to hurt them again. He didn't hide Ree's shoes. He was playing a much deadlier game. A deep dive background check on her was already in motion, running through his off-the-grid network. He grilled Margaret Byrne every day, asking if Ree was sneaking into Conrad's office, making secret calls, or meeting anyone. His appearance at dinner on the 6th night wasn't a white flag. It was a recon mission to watch her up close. The whole meal, he stared at her with the focus of a predator, looking for any crack in her armor. Ree felt his eyes on her. She knew Felix was just waiting for one screw-up, one wrong question, one hint of greed. She wasn't scared. Her only secret was the growing stack of Tommy's drawings in her pocket. During week 3, Conrad had to leave for Boston to handle business with an East Coast crew. A power move he couldn't delegate. Not showing up would look like weakness, a sign to his enemies that Conrad Valetti was slipping. 3 days, he told Felix before the car took off. 3 days, lock down the estate, isolate the family. No one comes in or out until I'm back. Felix nodded. Conrad's eyes then landed on Ree in the kitchen doorway, holding for 2 beats longer than normal. He got in the car without saying goodbye, In his line of work, goodbyes were a weakness for men who might not come home. The first day passed with a fake sense of calm. Ree cooked, Paige helped her. Na and Noah fought over the TV before eating together. At the table, Tommy left another sketch for Ree, a cat sleeping in a sunbeam. Every 2 hours, Felix did his security sweep, checking cameras and gates, his eyes giving Ree a cold, clinical scan each time he passed. On the second night, that fake piece shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. At 23:43, Ree was sitting at the kitchen table, the only person awake in the house, looking over an old ledger to calm her mind. The kids were all asleep. Felix was downstairs, in the room next to Conrad's office, sleeping with a pistol under his pillow, the only way he ever could. The first thing Ree noticed was the sound, or the lack of it. The silence felt wrong, not just quiet, but like the air itself had gone thick and dead. Her eyes shot from the ledger to the security monitor. The camera feed from the front gate was looping. It wasn't broken. A dead signal would be a blue screen. This was a ghost image, playing on repeat. The same tree branch swaying, the same guard frozen in time. The system was hacked. They were being fed a ghost signal. Ree fought the urge to scream and stood her ground. Her heart was a jackhammer, but her hands were pure muscle memory, moving faster than thought. She killed the kitchen light, grabbed her phone, and hit Felix's number. He picked up instantly. Her voice was in tight, controlled whisper. "The gate's on a loop. We're hit. Get upstairs now." Felix didn't ask questions. He knew that when the firewall drops, the next 30 seconds decide if you live or die. His boots pounding the stairs sounded like war drums as Ree slipped into the central hall. A blast of glass ripped through the house like a shockwave. The garden door was completely blown in. This wasn't a random brick. It was a professional breach, clean and surgical. Ree and Felix met at the foot of the stairs. In the dim light, she saw the gun in his hand and his eyes, which were no longer judging her but sweeping for threats. "How many?" Felix bit out, his jaw tight. "No idea. We're flying blind. No cameras, no gate signal. Could be 3, could be a platoon." A weird glow erupted from the garden, followed by the crunch of combat boots on glass. They were inside. The enemy was in the house. Ree's head snapped up toward the top of the stairs. "Paige!" she called out, her voice a narrow beam meant only for her. "Safe room, get the twins now, drop everything and move." From upstairs came a mad dash, a door creaking, and Na's sleepy voice asking what was wrong, only to be cut off by Paige's sharp command, "Quiet, follow me!" They were running for the steel-lined sanctuary Conrad had built. That room had 12 hours of oxygen for 6 people. Ree heard the heavy thud of the steel bolt locking. That's 3 kids safe, but 2 were still in the kill zone. Tommy. The name hit her like a punch. He was on the 3rd floor, walled up in his art studio. The 19-year-old used loud music to block out the sounds of his mother's murder every night. He was completely oblivious. Ree met Felix's eyes, and in that moment, all their bad history evaporated. It was just a cold calculation, and they were 1 head short. "Tommy's on 3, she said. Felix started for the stairs. "I'll get him." "No." Ree's hand shot out, her voice a razor that stopped him dead. "Your job is to hold the staircase. If they get to the 2nd floor, that door is our last stand. You have the only gun. Lock it down. Nobody gets past. I'm getting Tommy." Felix stared at her, and for the first time, he didn't look at her like a business deal. He looked almost scared. Are you out of your mind? Felix growled. They're armed. So what? You have nothing to lose. I have Tommy, she fired back. Her voice changed, becoming something primal and fierce, a mother's instinct that was tougher than any bullet. Oh, hold the stairs, Felix! She turned toward the black void of the third floor, completely unarmed, her bare feet silent on the wood, her heart pounding. From below, she heard Felix curse, then the clean, metallic click of a round being chambered. His gun was now aimed at the approaching shadows. The third floor was a black hole. They'd cut the power with the cameras, creating a dark hallway lit by a single streak of moonlight. Ree moved forward, pain from an old foot injury shooting up her leg with every step. Her bare feet might be quiet, but only because a fever had swollen her foot so badly that shoes were impossible. Tommy's studio was at the end of the hall, the door cracked open to pure darkness. Ree slipped in, her eyes adjusting to the black. She found him jammed in a corner, barricaded by canvases. He was hugging his sketchbook like body armor, knees pulled up tight, his eyes locked on a nightmare only he could see. Ree knew that empty stare. He was gone, lost in a flashback from 4 years ago, the night he watched his mother get shot 3 times. He was only 15. Tonight's chaos had sent him spiraling right back to that moment. Tommy. Ree knelt down, making herself small, her voice soft despite the chaos inside her. Tommy, it's Reese. You need to stand up for me now. Did he even hear her? His eyes looked straight through her. He was gripping the sketchbook so tight his knuckles were white, his whole body shaking from a memory no drug could touch. Then footsteps, heavy, steady, coming up the stairs. Not Felix. She'd heard 2 shots downstairs. He was in a fight. That meant one guy was tied up with him and another had found a different way up. The East Service stairs, she realized, a route she'd found her first week. The footsteps stopped right outside. Ree stood, turning away from Tommy to face the door. Her hand swept a table, searching, and found a 6-inch steel palette knife. A painter's tool. It was nothing, a joke of a weapon, but it was all she had. For 27 years, Reese Calloway had survived on scraps. The door slammed open. A huge figure in black filled the frame, face hidden, a silenced gun at the ready. His eyes found Tommy, the prize, and then snapped to Ree, the obstacle. He tilted his head, slightly confused by the sight of a woman in pajamas holding a tiny knife. But Ree didn't move. She stood her ground, barefoot and defiant. She looked the killer right in the eye with a stare everyone in her life had always misread. When she spoke, her voice was rock solid. To get to him, you have to go through me. The man raised his weapon, and in that exact second, another shot exploded from the hall behind him. Felix Valetti was at the end of the hall, breathing hard, a fresh blood stain spreading across his left shoulder. Smoke wisped from his gun. He'd fired just a split second before the assassin. The attacker crumpled, his gun clattering across the floor. Felix moved in, kicked the weapon away, and confirmed the kill while speaking into his phone. 3rd floor secure. Need backup now. Ree didn't even watch. Her eyes were on Tommy. He was still in the corner, but he wasn't looking through her anymore. He was seeing her, and on his tear-stained 19-year-old face was an expression of pure, unshakable trust. She knelt by his side, tossed the useless knife, and pulled him into a hug. Tommy's sketchbook dropped as he clung to her arm like a drowning man. He began to sob without a sound. All the grief of a 15-year-old boy finally escaping a 19-year-old's body. No one in this house had ever told him it was okay to show weakness. Backup swarmed the place in 7 minutes. 12 minutes later, Conrad's private cleaners took over and the attacker's body simply ceased to exist. No reports, no records. That was their world. In the hall, Ree and Felix leaned against the wall, inches apart. Tommy was asleep in her lap, breathing easy. Felix stared into nothing, the blood on his shoulder like a medal. He finally looked at her. For 2 weeks, he had analyzed her, picked her apart, and written her off as a problem. Now the judgment was gone. In its place was the raw respect of one fighter for another, for a barefoot woman who was ready to die for his brother with a painting tool. "You could have run," Felix said, his voice raw. "You had no contract for this. He's not your blood." Reese looked down at the boy in her lap, gently stroking his hair. Her answer was simple and absolute. "You're wrong, Felix. This became my family the moment I walked into this house." Felix was silent for a long moment. Then, making a massive statement, he took off his black leather jacket, his armor, the one thing she'd never seen him without, and laid it over her shoulders. In the Mafia, a gesture like that isn't just kindness. It's a claim. It's a public notice. She is mine. Hurt her, and you answer to me. Ree pulled the jacket tighter, feeling his warmth. For the first time in this house, she felt safe. Conrad got Felix's call at 12:17 a.m. in a Boston hotel, and his world stopped cold for 3 seconds. That tiny pause felt longer than all his years of bad news and hospital nights. Because for those 3 seconds, he was trapped in the hell of not knowing which of his family was still breathing. So Felix gives his report, cold and clean, like a hitman's work. It was a raid, 4 hostels. Security got smoked. Gate team is down. Tommy was the mark. But the threat is boxed up. No friendly casualties. Backups on deck. And that's all Conrad needs. He kills the call, gets dressed in 40 seconds, and has the black Maserati tearing out of Boston at 123 miles per hour in 2 minutes flat. He floors it west on Interstate 90, making a beeline for Chicago, a 6-hour sprint. He doesn't stop for gas, doesn't stop for food, he just drives. Knuckles bone white on the wheel, totally zoned in. One thought playing on a loop, losing another person from that house would absolutely destroy him. 4 years back, he put his mother in the ground. 3 years back, he almost joined her. He survived both. But on that empty stretch of road between Boston and Chicago, Conrad admitted his circle of protection wasn't just Felix or Tommy, Paige or the twins anymore. Ree was in it now. The waitress he hired less than 3 weeks ago just made the list of people he'd burn down a city for. He couldn't even pinpoint when that flip switched. At 6:15 that morning, the Maserati rolls up to the Lincoln Park estate. Conrad steps into the biting Chicago air, sees the busted sitting room door is already boarded up with plywood, a pro job done overnight. No cop cars, no crime scene tape. Not a single sign that 10 hours ago, this place was a full-blown war zone. In Conrad Valletti's world, the signs of a fight are gone by sunrise. He walks in, not to the dead quiet Felix described, but to the cozy vibe of a sleeping house. The main sitting room, where glass had exploded and bullets had probably zipped through, is now lit by a soft, crackling fire. And there on the charcoal sofa is Ree, sleeping upright in the corner, her head tilted just so. Tommy is passed out on the couch, his head right in her lap, looking more at peace than Conrad has ever seen him. Paige is crashed out at the other end on some blankets, her hand clutching Tommy's shirt like she's afraid he'll disappear. Tommy's sketchbook is on the floor next to a tiny paper knife. Conrad's eyes lock onto the knife, wondering what the hell it's for, until he catches some movement. It's Felix, posted up in a chair by the entrance, a pistol on his lap, with dark circles under his eyes from pulling an all-nighter on watch. He stands as Conrad gets closer, and the brothers just share a heavy, silent look. Felix then drops his report, his voice low, totally flat, a step-by-step breakdown of the home invasion. He lays it all out, the cameras going dark, the sickening crunch of glass shattering, and how reacted a split second faster than he did. He tells Conrad how she ordered him to get Paige to the panic room, told him to hold the stairs, and then went charging barefoot up to the 3rd floor in pitch darkness all by herself. Felix stops for a sec, and when he starts again, his whole vibe has changed. It's not a report anymore. It's a dude trying to explain something that shouldn't be possible. She went at him with the letter opener, Felix says, but he's not looking at Conrad. He's staring at Ree. The guy had a silenced pistol. Her weapon was a paper knife, shorter than your finger. She had to know she was walking into her own death. You get it? She knew, and she didn't even flinch. Felix finally looks back at his brother, and his eyes, which had held nothing but shade for Ree for 2 weeks, were now full of a respect Conrad had only seen him give to his own blood. She could have run, bro. Nobody would have blamed her. She was just a name on a piece of paper. Felix swallows hard. But she held the line. Conrad says nothing. He walks past Felix into the sitting room and stops by the sofa. He just stands there, watching Ree, his gaze fixed on her hand, which, even asleep, is still resting on Tommy's hair. His eyes drop to her bare feet, a brutal reminder of how vulnerable she was last night. He clocks the heavy leather jacket draped over her, Felix's jacket, and deep inside his chest, a wall he built after his mother died, and made even stronger the day they told him he'd never have a son, starts to crack. Conrad drops to one knee beside the couch. The sight of this absolute titan kneeling is enough to wake Ree up. Her eyes snap open, locking right onto his. Then her whole body goes rigid, pure combat instinct kicking in. Her eyes dart around the room, scanning for threats before they finally land back on him. Conrad knew that move all too well. The subconscious threat scan that was second nature to him and Felix. The fact that Ree just did it without thinking told him something inside her had permanently snapped into place. It wasn't a choice. It was raw conditioning, a fact that hit him with a sick mix of pride and a deep, crushing sadness. "You're not hurt?" Conrad's voice was a deadpan monotone. His jaw, though, was a block of granite, and his eyes were anything but calm. They were icy, like a predator's, scanning her for a single drop of blood, a single bruise, any sign she'd been touched. "I'm fine," Ree croaked, her voice wrecked from exhaustion. Conrad just gives a slow, deliberate nod. His jaw clenches even tighter, his voice sinking to a level Felix called the point of no return. A tone where Conrad's voice didn't get louder. It got so quiet the air thinned out, and people stopped breathing just to hear him. "You went up against a gunman with a letter opener. You had no armor. You had no weapon. You ran barefoot straight towards a guaranteed death." The rage was a hurricane, but it was all aimed at himself. For not being there. For letting her step into a role that was his and his alone. For a debt he now had that could never be repaid. Ree just held his stare. No excuses, no explanations, no defense. She dropped a single line. her voice so empty of emotion, so final, it sliced right through his fury like a scalpel. The deal was a joke by the second week, Conrad. He could only stare back. She held his gaze, and in that moment, the entire mental fortress Conrad had spent 3 years building, made of poison, infertility, and the fear of losing anyone else, was completely leveled. And through the rubble, he didn't see a waitress or a contract bride anymore. He saw the woman who would die for his family with nothing but a paper knife. And a crazy idea took root. He was never, ever letting her leave this house. Conrad turns to his brother and spits out a single sharp command. Out! He shuts the door, pulls a chair up to her bed, and stays there for 2 days. For 48 hours, the most feared man in Chicago's underworld watched over a waitress while a fever tore through her. He changed the cool cloth on her head every 20 minutes, lifted her up to drink water, and counted every single breath she took. He counted them just like he did for his mother 4 years ago, a watch that had ended in total failure. On the second night, around 3 a.m, the fever finally broke. Ree's eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was Conrad. He was clutching the mattress like she might float away if he let go. Dark bruises from pure exhaustion were stamped under his eyes. 2 days of stubble coated his jaw. His shirt was a mess of wrinkles. The billionaire crime king looked just like any other guy, terrified of losing the one thing his money could never buy back. Conrad, Ree whispered, her voice barely there. He snapped his head up, and the relief that washed over his face was so intense it was almost scary. It was the look of a man who just got pardoned a second before the axe fell. He leaned in, his knuckles turning white against the mattress. When he finally spoke, all the authority was gone from his voice. It was the voice of a man who, in the dark of a 2-night vigil, had finally admitted he couldn't handle losing her. You hid that wound for 3 weeks. You almost died from a shard of glass you never told me about. Do you have any clue what that does to me? Ree just watched him, her eyes hazy but definitely there. Angry. No, Conrad said, and the word just snapped. It was a tiny, clean break, but Ree heard it. She was witnessing the impossible. Conrad Valetti was losing his cool. Not angry, terrified. I made a contract for a business partner. I got someone whose loss would make me burn this whole city to the ground. I love you, Ree, and that scares me more than any bullet ever could. The room went dead silent. The only sounds were the quiet drip of the ivy in the wind outside. Reese looked at him for a long moment. Then with a weak, shaky hand, she reached up and traced the scar running along his jawline. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, like she was reading the history written on his skin. Conrad didn't move a muscle. To everyone else, Ree whispered, her voice clear, even though it was soft. I'm damaged goods, a risk, a throwaway. But here, with you, I want to stay. Not for the money, not for $280,000. For you. Conrad's hand covered hers, swallowing it completely as he leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. He was so close, Ree could see the flecks of silver in his stubble. In that room, at 3 a.m, the business deal between the cold-blooded crime boss and the desperate waitress was officially dead. And in its place, something started to grow that no contract could ever contain. After the attack, Conrad Valetti's whole routine in his own house started to change. It wasn't one big thing, but a bunch of small adjustments. He started getting home before 7 o'clock. Before, he was a ghost until 10 at night, locked away in his office. Now you could feel his presence in the house way earlier. So get this. Conrad finally stops ghosting his family and shows up for dinner. He's dead silent, just munching on Rhee's cooking and watching everyone. But he keeps locking eyes with Rhee, looking at her like she's a glitch in the matrix he can't figure out. The real plot twist, though, involves his brother Tommy. 2 weeks later, Conrad's walking past the third-floor art studio, a hall he always ignores, but this time he actually stops. Tommy's vibing in his own world, headphones on, when his brother Conrad shatters the peace with the first real words spoken between them since their mom's funeral. After a heavy pause, Tommy shows him the painting. It's their mother, caught between shadow and light. The message is loud and clear. Conrad gives a single quiet nod of approval. And then Tommy, who's been silent for 4 years, drops a full sentence to defend his new protector. Rhee did not abandon me. The kid's loyalty is locked on Rhee, his new shield after their mom died. Conrad doesn't say a word, just puts a hand on his brother's shoulder, and they vibe over the art for a solid 20 minutes, their deepest talk in 4 years. Fast forward 5 months and Rhee's whole public image is completely rebooted. The woman walking into the Palmer house is a total stranger. The waitress is gone, deleted from the server. Her stark black dress isn't just clothing, it's a declaration. The only bling she's got is a platinum ring Conrad gave her out of pure want, not duty, 2 months ago. The black heels, a gift from Paige, scream confidence she mastered in just 1 week of practice. Her hair is pulled back, showing off a jawline that could cut glass. And her eyes, once haunted, are now as cold and clear as a winter lake. To her right, Conrad's massive facial scar isn't a flaw. It's a freaking statement about who he is. At Rhee's left, Felix stands like a human shield, a silent vow of protection everyone in the room can feel. Behind them, Paige, at just 24, has the calm of someone who's spent her life handling drama between dangerous dudes. And there they are, the Valetti family, a united squad, showing up to the council for the first time in the 4 years since their mother was taken out. A power move louder than any speech. The meeting goes down in this dark, oak-paneled room at the Palmer House, the same spot where old-school gangsters carved up the city. The ceremony of power never changed, just the suits did. 14 guys from 7 top families, the unofficial kings of the city's underworld, are all there. This council is the law here, built on fear and force. As Rhee walks in, her eyes slice across the room and lock onto Vera Ashton, a ghost from her past life, stuck in the wives section because her judge husband is just a pawn in their game. Vera's voice just dies when she sees Rhee in the doorway, and for a second, the world stops. Her hand shakes so bad she drops her champagne flute, and the sound of it shattering is the only thing you hear in the dead silence. Vera looks like she's seen a ghost, staring at the woman she used to call breathing furniture. Rhee gives zero reaction, her gaze already moving past this nobody, landing on the head of the table as she forces the tension out of her own jaw. In a back row sits Grant Hartwell next to some creep named Antonov. Grant's suit is perfect, just like when he called her damaged goods. But dude has not aged well. He's got dark circles under his eyes, and his jaw is clenched with stress. In his stare, Rhee spots something new that wasn't there 5 months ago. A toxic mix of regret and straight-up envy. It's the look of a guy who finally gets the value of what he torched. She breaks eye contact in less than a second. She slides into the empty chair beside Conrad at the south end of the table, taking a seat of power that's been vacant for 4 years. The meeting kicks off with the formal rituals Conrad prepped her for. After some boring talk about turf and money, Antonov Yurkov gets up. The guy's presence sucks the warmth out of the room, making it instantly cold. His speech is slow, his Russian accent hitting like a calculated threat. And then he announces he's coming for the Valetti family's seat on the council. Yurkov's attack is a two-pronged assault. First, he frames Conrad's lack of an heir as a major weakness, making it seem like their family line is a threat to everyone's stability. The second, more brutal hit comes from Grant Hartwell. On cue, Grant passes around a file to every member. In a dead serious tone, he lays out the contents. A bunch of fake evidence on the Valetti's finances, engineered to trigger a federal investigation that would completely wipe them out. The offer wasn't a truce. It was a hostile takeover. Yurkov would seize all Valetti assets under a temporary guardianship. Everyone turns to Conrad, but he doesn't even look at the papers. His eyes are burning a hole through Grant Hartwell. Grant knows that look. It's the same terror he felt when he trespassed on Valetti property once. Conrad's rage is so thick you could cut it, his hand balling into a fist under the table as Felix's own hand drifts toward his gun. Just as Conrad is about to explode and start a war, a hand lands on his arm, soft but impossible to ignore. Ree is looking right at him. With a tiny nod, she whispers a command meant only for him. "Let me." For 3 silent breaths, the whole council just watches, stunned. Then the unthinkable happens. Conrad backs down. The tension drains from his body, his fist unclenching. The council just witnessed a silent coup. Conrad Valetti, who bows to no one, just handed the reins to his wife. Ree rises with total calculated calm, knowing every single eye is glued to her. She walks from her chair to the middle of the table, right in front of the dossier, meant to be their execution order. Her voice is crystal clear and steady as she says, "Gentlemen of the council, I am Ree Valetti. I'd like to see the documents Mr. Yurkov has provided." Anton Yurkov just leans back and smirks, like a king watching a peasant who wandered into his court. "This is a boardroom, Mrs. Valetti," Yurkov sneers, his accent making her name sound like an insult. "Not a restaurant." A couple of his cronies let out some weak laughs. Grant Hartwell just stares at the table, his silence screaming guilt. Both of these clowns made a fatal mistake. They thought her past was her present. They were dead wrong. Ree lets the insult hang in the air and die. She just holds out her hand. Palm up. A silent, non-negotiable demand. Yurkov shrugs and shoves the file at her, totally convinced she's too stupid to understand it. She doesn't just read the pages. She devours them. Her mind laser-focused from 2 years of finance at DePaul before her life went sideways. For the last 5 months at the Valetti compound, she wasn't sleeping. She was studying. In the quiet of the library, she broke down every single financial document she could find. Deeds, tax shelters, wire transfers. This wasn't a chore, it was survival. She was mapping the battlefield of her new world. In Conrad's world, money is the language, and she had just made herself fluent. After 3 minutes of dead silence, Ree finishes her review. She sets the file down, her finger tapping on page 17. Her eyes lock with Yurkov's. "Mr. Yurkov," Ree says, her voice completely flat. "The 12 property transfers listed here are Section 1031 exchanges. It's a basic tax deferment strategy used legally by tons of American investors every year. This isn't a criminal conspiracy. It's accounting 101. A wave of unease ripples through the room. Yurkov's face turns to stone. Ree keeps going, flipping to page 23. The actual felony, though, is right here. A legal exchange needs supporting paperwork. Our family's original files have all of it. She taps the folder. In the version Mr. Hartwell passed around, every single exhibit has been systematically removed. Not some, all 12. This wasn't a clerical error, it was a deliberate forgery. A heavy silence fell over the room. Grant Hartwell went totally rigid, the color draining from his face until his skin looked like pale wax. A single drop of sweat on his forehead screamed panic. He looked at Ree, but he wasn't seeing the waitress he'd called damaged goods. He was staring down the auditor who just torched his entire scheme. By the way, Ree said, her voice dropping, when a banker spills client secrets without a warrant, he's breaking the Bank Secrecy Act. That little mistake starts with a $500,000 fine and 10 years in federal prison. She let that bomb hang in the air before whipping out a folded document. But the proof is right here. A wire transfer confirmation from Jerkov Holdings to a private account in the Caymans. The account holder, Grant Arthur Hartwell, $250,000, sent 3 weeks before this meeting. Mr. Jerkov paid Mr. Hartwell to cook the books and wreck the Valeti family. If this council still wants a vote, I say we first vote on sending this to the FBI. The room went dead silent. The 14 men at the table were frozen like statues. Jerkov laid his hands flat on the table, a slow, deliberate move that didn't hide the rage tightening his jaw. His whole view of Ree flipped. The contempt was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating respect. Grant Hartwell shot to his feet, his chair screeching on the marble as a silent scream ripped from his throat. The woman he dissed over a $280,000 debt just orchestrated his public execution. He snatched his briefcase and vanished, the door clicking shut like a cell-block door. From his seat, Felix Valeti, the very guy who once called Ree a risk, cut through the quiet. His words were like knives. For anyone still confused, let me make this simple. This is my sister-in-law. To get to her, you go through me first. Then Conrad stood up. A man of action, not words. He made his point physically. He put a hand on Ree's waist, pulling her in to show a solid, unbreakable front. His gray-blue eyes locked on Jerkov's, not with anger, but with something way deadlier, the icy chill of possession. She is my wife, a Valeti. Anyone else want to argue the point? The council stayed quiet. The vote was officially dead. 10 minutes later, Jerkov was gone, without another word. And so Ree Calloway, once slapped with the label damaged goods, walked out of the Palmer House Hotel, flanked by Conrad, Felix, and Paige. Her story already becoming a Chicago underworld legend. In the next few months, the Valetis didn't just recover, they kicked off an expansion not seen in a decade. Ree joined Conrad's inner circle, not just as his wife, but as a strategist, rebuilding their finances with an accountant's skill and a survivor's fearlessness. Her proposal even made Conrad pause. A total cleanup of their money flow, shifting assets from shady deals into legit businesses and buying up properties through laundered shell companies. It wasn't about morals, it was a power move meant to pull the Valeti name out of the shadows. A legal empire would give the feds and the consul zero leverage. After a week of intense debate, Conrad gave a short approval. Proceed. That was her green light. By June, for the first time ever, their legit real estate profits out-earned their illegal income. That July, Conrad took over territory in southern Indiana without a single act of violence. Clean money turned out to be a better weapon than fear. The biggest change, though, was in Felix. Once the outsider, he was now a key player, having morning coffee with Ree at the kitchen island. Their conversations were short and sharp, the efficient language of two people who hated small talk. He started asking for her input, first on security, then on people, and finally on big picture strategy. When some underling questioned Ree during a June meeting, Felix shut the guy down in under 45 seconds with a chilling finality that was never spoken of again, but was burned into everyone's memory. He was no longer just Conrad's muscle, he was now the protector of the new Valetti dynasty. With Ree as its undeniable queen, Paige, in early June, sent her application to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for fashion design. This was a 3-year-old dream she had buried when her family's world turned into a fight for survival. It was Ree who found Paige's hidden sketchbook and hyped up her dream, saying, "You have an incredible talent." It was Ree who paid the tuition from a fund Conrad set up for her. Money she never used, since a life of poverty had left her with no idea how to spend on herself. But she knew exactly how to invest in Paige's future. Tommy's comeback was a quiet miracle. He was still a ghost in his third-floor studio, but his art started to shift. Before Ree, his paintings were all dark colors and lonely, blurry shapes. His art became the family's emotional diary. Gloomy canvases exploded with bright color, the warm yellow of the kitchen, the deep red of the fireplace, the soft blue of a Chicago sky. He even started painting actual people, not just abstract blobs. Paige smiling, Felix with his coffee, Nina and Noah fighting on the couch. And at the heart of nearly every piece was Ree, the stabilizing force. He started coming out of his shell, joining them for meals, going from 3 times a week to 5, and then every day. His words returned, few but strong, rebuilding a foundation shattered by trauma. The 16-year-old twins, Na and Noah, went from hostile to fighting over who got to sit next to her. And Na, the girl whose words were weapons, went from giving Ree the silent treatment to using her name, and finally to one word that changed everything: sister. That tiny shift in name carried more weight than any downtown business deal. A fragile peace settled over the house, a balance that held until August. A smell is what broke it. Ree, who had survived on espresso since she was 18, the fuel for her fight, suddenly hated it. The smell of coffee, once her lifeline, became disgusting. One morning, the aroma from a fresh pot sent her sprinting to the bathroom to be sick. At first, she wrote it off as exhaustion from pulling 14-hour days cleaning up their finances. She tried hydrating, changing her diet, but the sickness stuck around. The nausea hit again on day 3. By day 5, the room would spin whenever she stood up. On the 7th, the smell of roasting meat made her rush to the balcony for 10 minutes, gasping for fresh air. A primal fear started to creep in, a specific dread only known by a child who watched a parent die from a slow-moving illness. Her mind went to dark places about the attack, the glass in her foot, an infection. She even wondered about some kind of slow-acting poison. She hid it, a defense mechanism she'd honed over 27 years of being on her own. Her first instinct when feeling any weakness was to bury the evidence. But Conrad Valetti was a pro at spotting little things. He noticed she wasn't drinking her morning coffee. He saw her avoiding the grill. He caught the tiny squint in her eyes when she stood up, a micro expression of her body fighting off dizziness. He saw these things because he'd spent 5 months studying her, memorizing her face until he could tell a real smile from a fake one. And on that day, she was faking it. One August evening, Conrad stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Ree at the sink. He wasn't one to beat around the bush. "What are you hiding from me?" Ree froze, her hand still under the running water. Nothing. The last nothing was a blood infection that almost took you out. "I will not ask you again, Ree." A moment of silence. She turned off the water, set down a dish, and faced him. In her eyes, Conrad saw something he had almost never seen there. Pure terror. "I'm sick every morning. The smell of coffee makes me gag. I get dizzy. I don't know what it is, but this is how it started with my mother." Conrad closed the distance between them, his hands gripping her shoulders. His gaze was cold, hard steel, a look she now understood wasn't anger but fear, the kind a king only shows his queen. "Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, Northwestern Memorial, we're seeing Dr. Helen Ross in obstetrics and endocrinology, the best in the city, not Stanton, not the family doctor, the best." Ree wondered what obstetrics had to do with anything but was too drained to argue. When Conrad Valetti used that tone, even she knew compliance was the only move. "So check it. It's 7:12 in the morning at Northwestern Memorial 4th floor. Ree's on the exam table, completely stressing, staring out at the lake and trying to get her heart to chill. Next to her, Conrad is frozen solid, poker face on Max. But he's gripping that chair so hard his knuckles are white. Ree knows what's up. Under that ice-cold exterior, my man is terrified. After 8 months, she can read him like a book. And she knows Conrad Valetti only makes a fist like that when he's bracing for a death blow. Then in walks Dr. Helen Ross with the results. She's 52, rocking the salt and pepper hair, and has the vibe of a 30-year vet who's seen it all. She's not impressed by anyone, not even a crime lord. She sits, glances at the chart, and gives them a look you just can't read. It's not pity, it's not coldness. It's the look of someone about to flip their whole world upside down. "Mrs. Valetti, the doctor," starts all business. "Before we get to this, I gotta ask your husband something." She pivots to Conrad. "Mr. Valetti, who told you that you were permanently sterile?" The scar on Conrad's jaw tightens up. "Dr. Philip Stanton, our guy. 3 years ago, after a poisoning, the test said the damage was irreversible." Dr. Ross just nods slowly, puts her pen down. When she talks next, her voice is softer, like she's choosing every word. "Mr. Valetti, I went over your entire medical file from that incident 3 years back. That poison, probably some industrial stuff, did a real number on your reproductive system. So at the time, Dr. Stanton's call was technically correct." She lets that last word hang in the air, and Ree forgets how to breathe. "But the human body can pull off some crazy comebacks when things change. Better diet, less stress, feeling safe. Stuff like that can fix what was called permanently broken. The verdict from 3 years ago was just a snapshot, not a life sentence." Conrad gives zero reaction. He's totally still, locked on the doctor. Ree sees his knuckles digging deeper into the chair. He's bracing for impact, conditioned after 3 years, where the word "but" always meant bad news was coming. Then Dr. Ross turns to Ree, almost smiling. "Mrs. Valetti, you're perfectly healthy. Your issue isn't from some toxin or sickness. You're pregnant, about 11 weeks. The whole world just melted. The view of Lake Michigan just dissolves. The bright lights, the sterile hospital smell, the machine hum, all of it just vanishes. Her brain zeroes in on a single phrase bouncing around the silence. Pregnant, 11 weeks. For about 5 heartbeats, Ree is absolutely paralyzed. Then her hands go flat against her stomach, feeling a firmness she now gets is a life, not some sickness. But, Ree chokes out, her vision blurring, they swore it was impossible. For 3 years, the specialist said it was permanent. How? A knowing smirk plays on Dr. Ross's face. I've been a doctor for 30 years, Mrs. Valady. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to never say never about the human body, especially when someone has a crazy will to heal. Her gaze flicked over to Conrad, who was still stiff as a board, then back to Ree. I'll give you 2 a minute. She gets up, grabs the chart, and slips out, the door clicking shut. A thick, dead silence fills the room. All you can hear is the soft hiss of the blood pressure cuff and 2 people breathing. Ree watches Conrad. He just sits there, staring at absolutely nothing. She took in the face of the guy Chicago called a monster, the man who ran a billion-dollar empire on pure nerve. She'd seen this dude take every kind of hit the world could throw at him without flinching. But this was something new. He was shattering, not from pain, but from a truth his brain just couldn't compute. Conrad doesn't just stand. He straight up collapses out of the chair like his skeleton decided to quit. His knees hit the cold floor. He leans forward, pressing his forehead against Ree's stomach. His big, scarred hands wrap around her waist, his face buried in her clothes. And then his whole body starts to shake. Not a sound comes out. Conrad Valletti lost the ability to cry out loud the night his mom died 4 years ago. Now his body just does it for him. His frame is hit with these massive, violent tremors, like a dam finally breaking, and out comes 3 years of deep-down psychic baggage, 3 years of being told he was the end of his family line, 3 years of his enemies whispering that his reign had an expiration date, 3 years of staring at the ceiling, thinking about how his legacy would just vanish. All that despair just explodes right there on the clinic floor. His head is pressed against his wife's belly where a tiny new heart is beating 160 times a minute, a heart that doctors swore was impossible. Ree runs her hands through his hair, holding on tight as her own tears stream down her face. But she's smiling through it, this shaky, bright look of someone stepping out of a long nightmare into sudden, blinding sunlight. Do you feel it, Conrad? Ree murmurs, her voice broken but clear. Can you feel it? We're having a baby. On that cold clinic floor, Chicago's most feared man just clings to his wife's waist, crying like someone who just found a lost piece of his own soul. And the woman society wrote off as broken just holds him, stroking his hair, knowing she was never flawed, never ruined, never infertile, because the impossible was growing inside her. Quiet, tough, and a total reflection of its mother. The next spring, 1 year later, with cherry blossoms all over the lake shore and a warm breeze finally breaking Chicago's 6-month winter, Ree delivered a healthy baby boy at that same hospital. Right where, 6 months before, she sat on an exam table and heard the 3 words that changed her entire life. The kid weighed 3.4 kilograms, screamed his head off, and was totally perfect. When the doctor laid him on her chest, she looked at that tiny, red, defiant face and just cried. Not from pain, but from pure victory. She was holding living proof against every garbage thing people had said about her. They named him James Calloway Valletti. The middle name came from Ree's side, from her dad, a steel worker who died in an accident when she was 11. He left nothing behind, no insurance, no settlement, just his daughter's memories. Now that name was on the birth certificate, the Valeti heir. Reimagined her dad somewhere, giving a nod of approval. Conrad was there the whole 6-hour marathon, holding her hand. And when their son let out his first cry, Chicago's top mob boss just leaned down to kiss his wife's forehead, too choked up with emotion to even speak. This was the second time Ree had ever seen him cry, and she decided right then that no one on this earth was ever going to make this man cry from pain again. From now on, it was happy tears only. 2 weeks later, the vibe at their Lincoln Park house was completely flipped. Any of the mob captains would have thought the scene was a joke. Felix Valeti, the 28-year-old family lieutenant who made his underlings shake in their boots, was on the couch. He was holding the baby with this hilarious, intense precision, elbows locked at 90 degrees, back ramrod straight, like he was disarming a bomb. His face was more focused than when he was facing down an enemy. Every little twitch from James made Felix look at Ree in total panic, like this 3.4-kilogram baby was the biggest threat of his entire career. Over in the corner, Tommy's at his easel. The painting is of James sleeping, a masterpiece of skill and pure emotion. What makes it powerful isn't just that it's good, but for the first time in 4 years, Tommy's art has no darkness, no shadows, no lonely figures. It's just light, a warm, golden glow from the kitchen lights on the baby's face. When he finished, he brought it to Ree and said, "Dead serious. This is for you. It's the first thing I've ever made that I actually love." Meanwhile, Noah was fighting so hard for his turn with James that Margaret Byrne had to set up a literal schedule. Noah got 30 minutes, then it was the next person's turn. The 16-year-old twins, the same ones who used to hide Ree's shoes and call her trash, were now calling her Sister Ree. They called James our baby with the total, unfiltered confidence of teenagers. Paige gave James his first outfit, one she sewed herself from soft white cotton with light blue details. It was the very first piece made by a freshman design student at the Art Institute of Chicago. When Ree put James in it, Paige started crying, not because she was sad, but because the last baby she saw in a homemade outfit in this house was when her mom was alive, and finally that painful memory was put to rest. Later that night, after the house finally went quiet, Ree was sitting in the cognac leather chair Conrad had made for her by the fireplace. James was asleep on her chest, his little breaths a steady warmth. The fire crackled. Conrad was over by the window, leaning against the oak frame, totally lost in thought. He wasn't looking outside, he was looking in. He was watching Ree and James. He saw Tommy's art hanging on the wall. He saw Paige's handmade outfit on a chair. He saw Felix's forgotten cold coffee next to the gun he'd left behind. A gun he, for the first time in his life, forgot he was even carrying. His eyes landed on the sneakers Nana and Noah had kicked off in a pile, a mess left from their rush to see the baby. He took in the entire scene. Every small, chaotic, imperfect detail that was buzzing with life. Right then, he knew this exact feeling was what he had given up on ever having just 3 years ago. What he'd found wasn't an empire, or power, or money, but a home full of kicked-off shoes and a weird mix of baby formula, oil paint, and cold coffee. A family. The whole story about her being broken was a lie. She was never incomplete. She was Ree Valeti, James's mother, the center of gravity for the 6 Valetis, the quiet queen of their empire, the woman who walked into this house with cheap shoes and an empty soul and turned it into a home. She did it not with cash or muscle, but with the one thing nobody can ever buy or break. a spirit that absolutely refused to quit. Deep in the dark study on the mansion's first floor, locked inside a 300-kilogram steel safe that only Conrad knew about, was a single, fragile piece of proof. It was tucked next to 3 handguns, 2 fake passports, and $750,000 in get-out-of-town money. It was a small, folded piece of old yellow paper, the receipt from Serafina, from an October night 1 year ago. The first time Conrad Valady ever walked into that place and saw a waitress who held her own in a lion's den. On the back in Conrad's sharp, slanted handwriting was one powerful line. "She did not yield. I have located her." The story of Ree and Conrad was never some fairy tale romance. The file on this case tells you no bedtime stories, no chosen ones, no happily ever afters. It was a record forged by raw survival, by going broke, by physical danger, by bodily harm, and by systems that failed her. But it had something legends don't: cold, hard facts. And these facts all pointed to a total rewrite of what worth even means. That a person's value has nothing to do with their bank account, their family name, or what other people think. Instead, value was in the guts to rebuild from absolute wreckage, in the kindness shown to other outcasts, and in the power to love, even after being told your whole life you weren't good enough. The subject, Reese, started this journey in $12 shoes and ended it as the boss of the whole operation. But the ultimate prize wasn't the power or the money. It was proof of a hardcore theory that if you push back against an unstoppable force long enough, eventually fate itself has to tap out. If this breakdown hit you on a deep level, log your response, share this file across your networks, and subscribe for more intel. We're building a database tracking how this subject's story lines up with your own cycles of destruction and comeback. Drop your own story below. Every single one is archived and analyzed for patterns. We operate on the belief that the peak of human experience is found in wellness, mental balance, and peace. Thanks for your time. This broadcast is over. Stand by for the next transmission.
Psychologically, Reese and Conrad are fascinating because both display trauma-shaped identities that initially masquerade as personality. Conrad presents as cold, controlled, and relentlessly strategic, but beneath that structure is catastrophic fear of extinction, fear of weakness, fear of losing one more person he cannot save. His diagnosis of infertility does not merely wound his body, it fractures his symbolic identity as patriarch, successor, and source of continuity. Reese, meanwhile, is the opposite profile. She is hyperfunctional under distress. She absorbs humiliation without theatrical collapse. She suppresses pain, adapts quickly, and maintains behavioral precision under threat. These are not accidental strengths. They are survival responses built through caregiving, debt, abandonment, and chronic instability. She has learned to keep moving because stopping has never been safe. What changes the Valady household is not romance at first, it is regulation. Reese brings predictability into a deeply dysregulated system. Tommy begins to trust. Paige begins to speak. Felix shifts from suspicion to loyalty. Even Conrad softens, not because he becomes weak, but because for the first time he encounters someone whose presence lowers the internal war inside him. Then comes the pregnancy twist, which psychologically matters even more than narratively. It is not just a miracle child, it is the collapse of a false life sentence. Conrad's body, like his heart, was not as permanently closed as he believed. The lesson is chilling and beautiful at once. Many people mistake survival mode for identity. But healing begins when someone creates enough safety for the body, the mind, and the heart to stop living as if catastrophe is always 5 seconds away.